would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land on which I live and work, the Gundagara land and people. I pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging, and extend that respect to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. I also want to acknowledge the traditional custodians of the lands on which you, our listeners, are joining us from today. I recognise the deep connection that First Nations people have to this land, their enduring culture, and their commitment to the preservation and care for their country. This land was never ceded, and it always was and always will be Aboriginal land. Hey there, and welcome to Beyond the Surface, the podcast where we explore the stories of people who have survived religious trauma, left high control or cult communities, and are deconstructing their faith. I'm your host, Sam, and each week I'll talk with individuals who have taken the brave step to start shifting their beliefs that might have once controlled and defined their lives. Join us as we dig into their experiences, the challenges they've faced, and the insights they've gained. Whether you're on a similar journey or you're just curious about these powerful stories, you're in the right place. This is Beyond the Surface. Welcome, Kit. Thanks for joining me.
Oh, well, thank you so much for having me.
I feel like saying thanks for joining me again, because if people don't recognize the same name, you joined me a while back for an episode on cognitive dissonance for the queer community. But today I've got you back finally to talk about your story, which I'm so excited about. And so before we sort of like kick straight in, where in the world are you right now?
Yeah, so I'm in upstate New York in the Adirondack Mountains,
Mhm.
and I'm on Abenaki land, and that means toward the dawn.
Mhm.
So that's where I'm located.
Lovely. It's like I'm sitting here like in October in Australia and it's spring, so I'm assuming it's pretty chilly there, I suspect.
It is about 0 degrees Celsius out
Right.
here,
Yeah,
and
that's pretty cold.
yeah, the leaves are absolutely gorgeous out here, and there are people that come from all over the country to see the leaves out here because it is so epic.
Yeah. Oh, I like we obviously say autumn, but like autumn fall is like my favorite season of the year. It's just beautiful. As much as like I love spring
Yes.
and flowers, like autumn, like the brown leaves and it's just beautiful. But anyway.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, let's get into like much more important stuff than like leaves and seasons, but um I like to start these episodes with like a really broad, vague question, which is where does your story start?
Mm. Well, my story starts in the Bible Belt.
Of course. Where else would it start? What was it like to grow up in the Bible Belt, Kit?
The way that I describe it is even the atheists are Christian.
I love that. Oh my goodness. Okay. So what do you mean by that? Because like I'm going to have like Australian and New Zealand people who are going to go, that makes no sense to me.
Yeah, so pretty much everything about the culture was Christian in some way. For instance, like where I grew up, American football was a really big thing. And
Mhm.
so anytime they would score, people would hold up their hands, like praising Jesus Christ, and say,
Oh,
"Touchdown, Jesus."
no. Oh my
Yes,
goodness. That's wild.
yes, I am for real. And so then, like, basically everyone knew the Lord's Prayer. People that did not identify as Christian would go to churches on the different major holidays.
Right.
And yeah, there was just a lot of Christian culture, purity culture that was woven into just general society in the Bible Belt.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's really important for people to make the distinguish between when like Christianity is a religion and Christianity is a culture, and they're
Yeah.
sometimes two separate entities in the one space. But
Mhm.
what was your home like? Were you guys like a very like Bible believing family, or were you like the cultural Christians?
My parents followed more closely after Dr. James Dobson than the teachings of Jesus Christ.
Okay, right.
Yeah.
Okay. So I know who James Dobson is, but for people who don't know who that is, give us a little like, spiel about who he is and why he is such a key figure in so many people's journeys and experiences.
Yeah, so with Dr. Dobson, he came out of Colorado doing a lot of work out of Colorado and was a psychologist.
Mm.
Basically, what he did was he took different models of psychology and put evangelical or Christian teachings on top of that. And it turned a lot of Christian homes into very violent homes. I grew up in a very violent home, and Dr. Dobson really encouraged parents to be physically violent towards their children and believed that that was a way that would make children submissive to their parents and do whatever the will was of the parents.
Mm. What was it like for you to grow up in that environment?
I mean, it was definitely like a fear-mongering environment,
Mm.
and it was not a safe environment whatsoever of growing up in. I used to fantasize running from home all the time. My biggest dream was to join the circus, and every year that the circus would come to town, I would try to figure out a new way of how to escape and join the circus. And it never worked out. So then I just kept staying in that environment and created a kind of dream world around me. So I did a lot of fantasy play with myself
Mm.
as a way of escaping emotionally from that kind of environment.
Mm. Yeah. How did that like integrate or interweave? I was going to say interwoven, but that was not the right terminology. Interweave with like the religious beliefs that you were being taught and like this um relationship with God.
The God that I was taught about was a very angry God. So it seemed an alignment. And it seemed like, well, God will love you if you don't make him angry, or your parents will love you if you don't make them angry. And the way that you don't make them angry is just to be quiet. So I was a very outgoing child
Yeah.
and yeah, just very charismatic.
Yeah.
But then that would cause a lot of anger for me speaking up and being creative
Mm.
and showing who I was that wasn't in this um, just in alignment of what I was told that I should be,
Mm.
of being assigned female at birth
Mm.
and in this evangelical space. And so I ended up becoming very quiet
Mm.
and didn't really give people the opportunity to get to know me whenever I hit around like 9, 10 years old, and stayed pretty quiet for about a decade.
Yeah. And I'm sort of like I'm sitting here going, like, I mean, it's very obvious, Kit, that you are a raging extrovert. So like I can't imagine you quiet for starters. Um, but I mean, like, and then my next thought is like of something much, I guess, more serious, which is like you sort of said that you never let other people get to know you. Did you let you get to know you?
For a period of time, I did.
Yeah.
And I think in fantasy play, whenever I was growing up, that was the time that I was most connected to myself.
Mm.
But whenever I got to be about the age 14, I was told that that wasn't age appropriate to be doing imaginary play anymore.
Mhm.
And I didn't have access to gaming.
Mm.
So because of that, then I started to become very disconnected with
Mm.
myself
Yeah.
during my teen years
Yeah.
and really lost who I was during my teen years.
Mm. What flavor of Christianity are you being taught at this point?
So my family would alternate in between Southern Baptist circles and Fundamentalist Baptist
Yep.
circles. Both sets of my grandparents ended up converting to Fundamentalist Baptist.
Okay.
And I went to a fundamentalist Baptist school through my freshman year of high school.
Mm.
But then my family would attend a Southern Baptist church every week.
Mm.
And both my parents had leadership roles in the Southern Baptist church. So I was going to church on average about 3 times a week. And then I was in the Christian school for 5 days a week and the Christian school, then having sermon 2 days out of the 5 days. And then the other 3 days I was having Bible classes.
Yeah.
So I was very deeply immersed into what I would call the Baptist tradition.
Mm. And was it always something that you were just being taught, or was it something that became personal for you?
I converted to Christianity whenever I was around 4 or 5 years old.
With so much
And
like prefrontal cortex developed to make those decisions, right? Oh
yeah,
my gosh, it grinds my gears so much.
it does. And I mean, it's just like children think very literally. So to be shown, something that was called a picture graph, where it was felt pictures that you put on basically a poster board that was made of felt, and they would show like pictures of humans falling into fire. And so, like, that is very traumatizing for children. And I didn't want to get abused anymore. And I'm like, wow, like, I would have, a, at that point, I didn't know what the word abuse was,
Yeah.
but I just knew that I was in pain at a very young age. And here I was being told that I would be in eternal pain. So I didn't want to be in eternal pain. I knew what pain was.
Yeah.
So that's why I made the decision to become a Christian
Mm.
at that point, because I wanted to escape that eternal pain.
Yeah.
Um, and then I ended up, whenever I was in third grade, I came out of the closet, and it was not a pleasant experience of coming out of the closet, and really showed me some very ugly sides to
Mm.
Christianity.
Yeah.
And I ended up secretly deconverting.
Oh.
And uh and then that lasted for about a couple of years. And then was just feeling very alone in my experience,
Mm.
hoping for some sort of a connection. And so I decided that I wanted to reconnect with God in another kind of way. And then I started really getting immersed into nature, and then that was the way that I connected with God. And I mean, today, how I am and how I believe, like, I don't say that I'm Christian. I don't believe in Christian teachings anymore,
Mm.
but I still do feel very connected to my spirit whenever I'm in nature. So I'm very glad that that was something that I was able to find as a result of just trying to find some release.
Yeah. It's every time I talk to somebody on this podcast and I do another interview, I'm always like reinforced with the belief that like churches are just like really missing the mark in what is going to lead someone down what they would call like the slippery slope, right? They always think that it's
Yeah.
like sex and drugs and like it's nature. Like nature is going to lead you down the slippery slope.
Hmm.
It's wild to me that they're just like totally missing the mark with that. Like
Yeah.
you're protesting the wrong shit, people. Like you just are. But yeah, okay. So like I'm curious about what that initial coming out process was like for you because and I think even um we are a day off. I think it was yesterday for me. It was National Coming Out Day or International Coming Out Day. So, like, I'm curious what that initial coming out was like for you.
So in my Southern Baptist church, the pastor ended up preaching a sermon about Sodom and Gomorrah
Mm,
and said that the AIDS crisis was our version of Sodom and Gomorrah,
yeah,
and that this was a gift from God to be wiping out gay people.
yeah,
And how he was phrasing it in the church was saying, like, the verses that go into the New Testament of a man should not lie with a man, a woman should not lie with a woman.
mm,
And I listened to it. I was paying attention, even with being so young.
yeah,
And I went up to my mom after the sermon and I said, I just had a slumber party with my friend so and so.
mm,
Does this mean I'm going to get sick and die and
mm,
go to hell? And my mom was very taken aback.
yeah,
And then, and so shortly thereafter, she ended up giving me the sex talk.
mm.
And I have never heard of someone having the sex talk the way that my mom gave the sex talk to me.
Okay.
And she did not give the sex talk to my older sister in this way.
Mm,
She told me about anal sex between men. She told me about strap-on sex between women. And whenever I heard about these things, I look at my mom and I said, that is so cool. And I was smiling ear to ear.
Not
And
the
my mom,
response I suspect she wanted.
no, she looked at me absolutely horrified.
Oh,
Then she went to explain to me sex for quote unquote the purpose of procreation, which she deemed as being godly sex. And now, whenever I look back at that, I'm like, she described marital rape.
mm-hmm.
And this is what was taught not only by my mom, but from other evangelical women to me thereafter of encouraging marital rape
Yeah.
and setting AFAB kids up to be maritally raped in the future. And and so whenever she told me about marital rape, I ran out of the room
Mm,
and I said, I don't want to hear about that anymore.
yeah.
And so I knew at a young age that that was wrong.
Mm,
And uh, and I think that's probably why a lot of evangelicals had a problem with me at such a young age because I had a very strong moral compass at a very young age and would call things out however I was able to at that age. And for me, running away in disgust,
mm,
that was that rejection of that teaching.
mm,
And so then I ended up having my first girl crush um a year after.
mm,
And I told my sister, and my sister said, don't tell mom or dad that, or you'll be homeless.
mm,
And I'm just like, how does another child know that? You
yeah.
know? And I didn't talk about having same-sex attraction
Mm.
uh anytime after that. And after I had come out to my mom in that sex talk, because like coming out can be so different. It doesn't mean that you have to find a label.
Yeah.
Like there's so many ways of like expressing oneself and our queerness. And after that, um, I was socially rejected.
Mm.
I stopped getting invites to birthday parties.
Mm.
Um, Whenever I was invited to parties, it was because everyone had to be invited. And it was like a public invitation. And I was given a mummy sleeping bag.
Mm.
And because like then I was just had this idea that was placed on me that I was some, you know, predatory kid,
Yeah.
and had that on me, that idea. And I mean, news travels fast whenever being part of these religious circles. And I don't know why per se that all changed overnight, but I have an idea that it was probably due to it getting around in a prayer chain
Mm.
to be quote unquote like relieving those same-sex attractions, where unfortunately that is something that has happened quite a bit
Mm.
to kids who grew up in non-affirming Christian families, of being outed through prayer circles
Yeah.
and then put in very dangerous and unsafe situations.
Mm. I'm curious how that impacted on your own view of your own sexuality. Like,
Yeah,
how did you view yourself?
well, uh, after the social invites stopped, I ended up just seeing myself as being completely unattractive. Like I thought that no one would ever have a crush on me. And I went into this mode of almost just being like, well, then I don't want anyone to. So I literally got a mom haircut. And I had my mom cut my hair. So like I had to like, so I was in fourth grade. I had to use a rounding brush for my
Oh,
haircut.
wow.
The bangs, the under, like I was wearing pearls, like fake pearls to
Oh my,
school, and fake pearl earrings. I looked like a stay-at-home mom from the 1960s for like a couple of
oh
years.
my God.
Yeah. And then I ended up as a teenager taking a vow of celibacy. And because I thought that I was unlovable.
Yeah.
And I was just like, well, okay, like I'll do like the Jesus loving thing. I'll just
Mm.
be celibate. And I just really dissociated myself from any idea that I could be attracted to someone or someone could be attracted to me.
Mm.
And um, and that lasted for almost a decade.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
It's a really long time.
Hmm.
Mm. And like, I mean, obviously, like I'm sitting here going, like, your teenage years are like, those identity forming moments, particularly around sex and sexuality and everything in that spectrum,
Hmm.
to have such a repressed view of yourself during that period of time. What was that like? Like watching everybody else go out and explore relationships and things like that.
I mean, a lot of it I was very afraid.
Yeah.
Like, um, whenever I was 15, my sister had just gone off to college about 10 hours away. And she ended up getting mixed up with substance abuse, became very drug addicted. And I was just told, like, uh, sex, drugs, rock and roll type of a thing, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so then there was this part of me that was just like, well, wow, like, I feel like I'm losing my sister. I don't want to lose myself.
Mm-hmm.
And so anytime, whenever I would feel like I was getting close to someone, then I would make up excuses to not see them. And that was a big part of my teen years
Mm-hmm.
of getting close, pushing people away because of fear.
Yeah. And were you still like multiple times a week going to church at this point? Like, is it
So
still reinforcing it?
whenever I was a sophomore, then I went to the public school because I was asking my parents, like, please get me out of this Christian school because
Yeah.
the bullying was just pretty horrendous. And my parents were like, well, we'll like send you to the neighborhood school. But like I grew up in the hood. So uh yeah. So then I had like multiple friends within a 1 year time period get like violently attacked because of gang related activities.
Yeah.
Um and um and so then I left that school because like uh it would just be too dangerous for me to have kept going there. And then my last 2 years of high school, I ended up homeschooling myself. And so um because of that, I wasn't going to the Christian school, so I didn't have as much immersion as what I did before. And whenever I was able to drive, then I was able to have more control over how much time I spent um, in the church, which was very liberating for me. Um, yeah, so that's
Mm.
what it was like of those last few years between like 15 to 18.
Mm. And so did like the ability to sort of like distance yourself from that immersion, did that impact on your view of self fairly quickly, or were you still so like, because obviously like we know the impact of like heavy levels of indoctrination up until that point, or was being able to separate from those environments pretty impactful?
I mean, during that time, I was doing a lot of reflection about the relationship with my sister.
Mm.
And I was also seeing a pastoral counselor.
Mhm.
And then that pastoral counselor was, lo and behold, giving me doses of conversion therapy and did not realize that.
Okay.
Uh, so, I was trying to figure out and navigate, the stress with living in a home where my parents were anti-therapy. And so I was getting pastoral counseling to try to be navigating things the best I could, but I was given very poor advice. And um, I don't know if this is who I inherently am or if this is how I was conditioned, but I prefer to follow the rules.
Mm.
So, because I was given a kind of quote unquote treatment plan
Yeah.
from pastoral counseling, I was following that. And it caused me to be uh, very buttoned up during those last few years of my teen years.
Yeah. And so I am conscious that up until now we've focused on your journey with your sexuality, but when did your gender come into the conversation?
I mean, whenever my sister and I were kids, she used to call me her brother.
Hmm.
She was like, "You make a much better brother than you do a sister." Like, she was like, "I see how other
Yeah,
sisters are with each other." And she was like, "That's not you." Like, she's like, "You're my brother."
yeah.
And that was something that was very hard for me to accept
Mm,
because I was just like, wow, just like another thing of um lack of safety.
mm,
Like uh because then that meant that, oh, would I be questioning God's creation? And then that was considered in my church like the ultimate slap in the face of God.
yeah, yeah. When did you like consciously start realizing that you were trans?
I didn't know the word trans until I was actually in grad school, my first year of grad school.
Yeah,
That is how impacted I was by the Bible Belt.
yeah.
And I was just introduced to trans women.
Mm,
And I didn't know at that point that there were trans men.
mm,
Um, and then I ended up moving to New York and I had some paperwork and it gave me more options than just male or female.
mhm,
And I was like, what? Look at this. And I selected non-binary and they them pronouns, and it just felt very natural for
yeah,
me at the time of selecting that. It made a lot of sense. And I was like, oh, so that's why I never really felt like I belonged into these
mm,
binaries that were given to me in the Bible Belt,
mm,
in educational spaces, in religious spaces. And I was like, wow, I'm not alone. Like that was wild for me because like, I mean, whenever I found out that people could get double mastectomies and not have cancer, I said to my mom and to my sister, I want that.
yeah,
And um and I was saying at a pretty young age, probably 14, that I didn't want kids and that I wanted a procedure to not have kids.
mm,
Um and I mean, I would draw a beard on my face any chance
yeah,
that I would get. I like whenever my parents would be out, I would be dressing up in my dad's clothes.
yeah,
There were all these different things that I was doing that I didn't know what that was about.
mm,
Like, I didn't know what it was about whenever I was a young child. And uh, at the point where I had friends in childhood where I would be playing the male role
mm,
every time. I would be playing the male role. I wouldn't be playing the female role.
mm,
Um, and that that felt more real to me
mm,
than ever being called a little girl, than
yeah,
ever being called she, her. Um, and so whenever I selected non-binary and they, them on my paperwork, I told my therapist at the time, and he responded so well. He was like, wow, like, that's amazing. And he was like, like, let's talk about this. And I was like, it is what it is. Like, I'm like, that's like, it's not really going to change anything about me.
mm,
And whenever it comes down to it, the reality is it really didn't change anything
yeah,
about me. Um, like, it was just that I'm like, that's cool that I'm not alone.
mm. And you had language to be able to describe it.
Yeah. And I mean, I still think that language for being trans is extremely limited.
Mm.
And so the different labels, there are still parts of it where it doesn't feel like always like the best fit to be describing who I am.
Mm.
And so I think that it's just beautiful to be able to have a space of open conversations about gender
Mm.
so that then people can know and understand where each other are coming from
Mm.
based upon the way that we identify and express gender.
Mm. Was it like immediately coming out of the Bible Belt into New York? Was exploring this world immediately exciting and liberating, or was there still like fear there?
So whenever I immediately went to New York, I was immediately out of the closet
Yeah.
as being attracted to all genders, and it was very easy for
Mm.
me to do that. But at that point, I didn't immediately have the language to express my transness until about like a year later. But
Mm.
then, um, whenever I had moved to New York, I had gone no contact with my family.
Mm.
And then a year passed by, and then my mom was diagnosed with terminal cancer. And then I felt like it was my responsibility to be taking care of my mom
Mm.
because I was like, my sister is struggling with addiction. Like, what else is going to happen? Like, I was like, I guess I better do this and like check in and see like what's going on, and see whatever I can do to help. So I started going back and forth between New York and the Bible Belt.
Mm.
And so then during that time, I started going in flux a bit about my gender expression, about the way that I expressed my sexuality. Like, I was told by people, like, every time you like talk to your family, every time you come back, they're like, it's like you've lost your muchness.
Yeah.
Um, and that's exactly what it was like. So, I mean, I was still out,
Mm.
but it was in a different kind of way at
Mm.
that time.
It's like playing two roles almost.
Hmm. Yeah.
I mean, we talked a little bit about that in the other episode around like cognitive dissonance, but like I don't I don't know about you, but I remember what it was like to have to like mask my sexuality and to play different roles depending on the people that I was around. And that's fucking exhausting. So like was it exhausting for you also?
I mean, I got sick a lot.
Okay.
I got sick a lot. Yeah, it took a toll on my immune system
Yeah.
for sure. Uh, I think it gave me confusion about what I wanted to do in terms of dating
Mm.
because then I started asking myself, okay, who would validate my queerness, but would also be okay for me to bring back home?
Mm.
Because I mean, it's like whenever you're confronted with mortality, then things can change because I mean, in coming out and like being like a person like under the age of 50, right? Like there's usually not going to be that kind of thought of mortality
Mm.
and how that's going to affect expression.
Yeah. Yeah. What was it like for you to be trying to embrace your queerness, but still having to come back and be a part of your family who, I mean, also like the same token, how did they respond to you being openly queer?
It was kind of a don't ask, don't tell
Okay.
type of a thing. And that's how that was handled with them.
Yeah. Mm. What was it like for, like, I mean, what was that dissonance like in terms of like, how were you able to continue embracing your queerness whilst having to go back and be a part of that environment?
It caused me to be very frustrated
Mm.
with myself. And with it and dissonance, whenever I think about dissonance, I think about it as not as much being a conscious decision.
Mm.
For me, it was a very conscious decision
Okay.
of because I was like, well, do I really want last conversations
Mm.
with my mom to be like, hey, I want you to call me they them and he him,
Mhm.
and also I hate this name you gave me
Yeah.
and I'm gonna change it.
Yeah.
Like, um, and so I was like, I don't think I want to do that.
Yeah.
And so then I had to, figure out what that was gonna be like. Um, and then I felt like there was a almost countdown of whenever my mom would die,
Mm.
so I could be able to feel fully authentically me in all spaces.
Mhm.
And I mean, this is something that happens a lot with people who are caregivers of having a countdown.
Mm.
And because like caregiver burnout is real.
Yeah.
And I had to explore that a lot in my own therapy
Mm.
of being like, this is actually really fucked up
Mm.
that I think that it's worthwhile to be able to only be living as authentically me after my mom passes
Yeah.
and to let family back in my life who are still not committed to nonviolent communication and nonviolent behaviors. Even my mom with cancer was still very violent.
Yeah.
And um and so then I came to this reckoning where I was like, you know what? Like I was like, my parents have saved and they have the means to be able to hire a caregiver for my mom.
Mm.
And I do not have to wash the hands of the person who beat me.
Yeah.
And what was really the big awakening for myself was I started working with older folks and started hearing their stories of um, washing the genitals of the parents who raped them, of
Yeah.
washing the hands of the parents who beat them.
Mm.
And they did that for a decade or longer. And I had to sit with myself and my discomfort and ask myself, would I be okay with doing this for a decade?
Yeah.
And I told myself, no, no,
Mm.
I need to live and I need to live fully.
Yeah.
And so I decided to walk away from my family and I told them, I said the reason why I'm walking away is because I thought that cancer could be able to change our family for the better
Mm.
and create a new family that was loving and that was kind and compassionate and actually did follow after the teachings of Jesus Christ. But at the end of the day, it's still a violent family and I can't support being in this. And I never engaged in those behaviors. But at the same point, I didn't want to observe that. I didn't want to be a victim of that. Uh, and um, and so I look back on doing that, and I'm really proud of myself for walking away,
Yeah.
because usually whenever people go no contact, they never really consider about like what would happen if my parents are dying, you know. But it is something that needs to be considered because death comes for us all.
Yeah. I mean, as you are talking about it, the first thing that comes to mind is that like that choice to go no contact is like a radical form of self-love that some people just don't understand, and they probably will never understand because they won't have ever had to make that choice. And um to be like completely frank, I think it's fucking incredible, to be fair, and brave. Yeah. What impact did that have on your sense of self after that point?
Oh, it was a huge
Yeah.
impact on my sense of self in the most incredible of ways.
Yeah.
I, after doing that, I grieved a
Mm.
lot. And I think I needed these mountains
Mm.
that I'm living in during the time that we're talking here. And I was living in a cabin, and the internet wasn't very good there. The cell signal wasn't very good. I had a lot of time with my thoughts, a
Yeah.
lot. I got a cat. I learned how to chop wood. I learned a lot of things, and um, if I didn't have that space, I don't know if I ever would have done that.
Mm.
I needed that space to
Yeah.
be able to do that. And something that I would do, there's this exercise called empty chair.
Mm.
And with empty chairs, you set up an empty chair or multiple chairs, and you talk to them
Mm.
as though they are representatives of parts of yourself or other people, and you have a conversation. And I did this so often
Yeah.
with chairs representing family members and with chairs representing different times of my life.
Mm.
And this was so cathartic for me to do. It was also very cathartic for me to finally get tattooed. Like one of my earliest memories was sitting on my papa, my paternal grandfather's lap, and he had tattoos before he had converted to
Mm.
Christianity. And I said, one day I'm going to get tattoos just like you, papa.
Yeah.
And my papa was a bad Christian. He was definitely a role model for me.
They're the best kind.
Yes. And in getting tattooed, I'm really glad that I got to be tattooed by an AFAB trans person who had also left evangelicalism.
Wow.
And we got to talk about, like what tattooing means and body autonomy
Yeah.
and the pain that the body goes through. There are also some natural springs and like a geyser and stuff nearby, and I would go there and I would just sit in mineral baths and just really think and consider. I really made it a priority to be focusing on finding reconnection
Mm.
with myself and letting go of shame. And the more that I did that, the more that I saw myself as a young child. Whenever I um, was beginning grief therapy after my mom's cancer diagnosis, because I decided to have a kind of pivot of my therapy and focus on grief work. My therapist was an existential therapist and asked me what I wanted to get out of this experience. And I said to him, I said, I want to become the person I was as a child.
Mm.
And he said, I don't know if that's going to happen. And I looked at him and I said, it better happen.
Oh gosh, I can just imagine what that therapist was thinking.
Yes.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I mean, you're talking a bit about, the things that you learnt by being in this little cabin in the mountains. What things did you unlearn during that process?
So something that I really came to be aware of is that whenever you leave an abusive relationship, a
Mm.
lot of times you end up carrying on the abuse and you start abusing yourself.
Yeah.
And I became very aware of how I was abusing myself and my thought processes. And I was restricting, I was restraining myself, I was shaming myself.
Mm.
And I started to make myself speak my thoughts out loud. And anytime I would say a self abusive thought, I would make myself reframe it every
Yeah.
single time. And that was something that absolutely changed my life
Mm.
of unlearning that kind of self abusive talk.
Yeah. Mm. And I am conscious here to ask this question because I am imagining like some of the people listening going, it sounds really good in theory, but in reality, like that's incredibly hard, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, the reality is it was a very painful process.
Yeah.
And so, one of the parts of this too is that I listened to a lot of music. I did a lot of dancing.
Mm.
And that was a really big deal for me because I was not allowed to dance
Mm.
in the Baptist tradition that I grew up in.
Mm.
Um, and through dancing, through a lot of crying, like, I mean, big sobs where maybe my neighbors in their cabins could hear me.
Yeah.
You know, you're right, it's not easy.
Yeah.
Like, it is not it is not a silent process
Mm.
of recovering from extensive abuse.
Yeah. Yeah. What was it like to you to, I hate the word deconstruct, but I'm gonna use it anyway. It's just like
Go
not
for it.
terminology that I love. I personally use the word detangle, but
I
that's
like
just because it fits better for me. But like, what was it like for you to pull apart the beliefs that you were raised with and that level of indoctrination that you received from the fundamental Baptist communities?
I'm gonna go back to my grief therapist who unfortunately, well, I guess not unfortunately, but he decided to pursue his dreams of studying neuroscience and becoming a neuroscientist.
Mm.
But he was just brilliant. Shout out to Robert. Um, but Robert was really the first person who called me out on things. Like, um, I would say maybe like some different phrases
Mm.
where he would be like, "Mm,"
What is that?
I'm just being like, I think that this is your programming of coming back, right? Of just really calling that out. I had no idea how much my programming influenced the way that I talked. And with part of that, it was because that programming was so common even outside of the church
Yeah.
of where I grew up in the Bible Belt. So I really needed someone who would just call that out to me and be like, hmm, you know. And so after that, I started realizing I was like, okay, like it would be helpful for me to have my friends who were not born and raised in the church and stuff. Also, oh, my cat wants to join. Okay, honey, you woke up from your nap. Okay. But yeah, that's my cat who came into the cabin with me, Arby. But anyhow, going back to this, so I would tell people that were not born and raised in the church, hey, like, if I say these different phrases that don't make sense, like, please call me out on it
Mm.
and let me know because I want to change that.
Yeah.
And they did, and that was really helpful.
Mm. What was it like for you to build like a new sense of spirituality, whatever that meant for you post like indoctrination in the cabin in the woods, like rebuilding whatever spirituality meant to you now?
Yeah, I mean, part of it started to get me to think about my family's own
Mm.
spiritual history. So, like my grandparents, before they converted, they were practicing pagans.
Mm.
And so, um, I was like, okay, I think I would like to explore that.
Yeah.
And so, um, I started exploring Druidism,
Mm.
and that was something that really resonated with me of really seeking to get connected with nature and respecting nature and listening to nature and
Yeah.
what nature is trying to tell us.
Mm. Yeah, I think the freedom to explore and learn and just like just that permission of like I get to learn about other forms of spirituality and ways of life was the most freeing part of like, quote unquote deconstructing. Because your worldview and your sense of what spirituality even means just like amplifies and expands. And you realize that actually exploring doesn't narrow your view, it widens it greatly. And so, yeah, I think it's one of the most beautiful, I think it can be one of the most beautiful parts of deconstruction. Um,
Absolutely. Yeah,
yeah.
I feel like my spirit was sleeping for a
Mm,
while there and it got woken back up.
yeah. One of my favorite questions to ask, and it sort of actually ties into we were talking a little bit before we hit record about like reclaiming language that we used to feel like Christianity owned. And spoiler, it doesn't. But um one of my favorite things to ask is um what brings you joy and peace?
Hmm. Wow. I'm seeing like poinsettias right now and red poinsettias and a nativity and a little bit of
Mm.
jingle bells with joint peace.
Yeah, I know. They're very Christmas oriented, aren't they? Um, and actually, if I looked back on when I originally started thinking about the questions that I wanted to ask for this podcast, it probably was in the few months before Christmas last year. So like um, maybe that had part of it to do with, but yeah.
I love it. I mean, what has really brought me joy and peace is to no longer tolerate abusive behaviors,
Mm-hmm.
to no longer tolerate violent language, violent behaviors. Yeah, I have
Mm.
zero tolerance for it.
Yeah.
I used to try to develop a sense of empathy,
Mm.
um, but that was coming from my unresolved savior complex
Mm.
of trying to find empathy from that. And I realized I was like, no, I don't have to empathize
Mm.
with that to be able to possibly help people.
Mm.
Like, this isn't helping myself
Yeah.
of tolerating this kind of behavior and language.
Mm. And I think that like that's actually a really hard um balance for a therapist, right?
Yeah.
It's
Yeah,
really
because
hard.
we're like taught to empathize with everything.
Mm-hmm.
And I maybe this is an unpopular opinion for therapists. I don't think that we do have to empathize
No.
with everything. And I think that that kind of rhetoric
Mm.
leads to burnout as well as moral injury.
Hmm. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and my brain is automatically going, don't ask more questions about that because that's a rabbit hole we do not have time to jump down. Because it is a whole thing. But I do want to ask quickly because you are pretty open on social media about um recently having gender affirming surgery and things like that. And so, what has that been like for you?
Yeah, I mean, I have felt so good in my
Yeah.
body of having a couple of gender affirming surgeries this year.
Yeah.
And I mean with part of this I have wanted it for
Mm.
many years now, but I also wanted to make sure that I was not grieving
Mm.
whenever I had these surgeries.
Yeah.
I wanted to make sure that I was just feeling um just going back to that joy and peace. I wanted to make sure that I was feeling that. I wanted to make sure that my social supports were solid, that I was really going to have people who are reliable to help me in the recovery process. And I'm very fortunate that I had all of those supports available for me. Um, but getting those surgeries done in a rural area wasn't that pleasant.
Yeah.
Um, of experiencing uh I mean, harassment, experiencing abusive behaviors from providers, which don't keep quiet about. So I
Yeah.
did report them.
Yeah.
Um,
Good.
uh, so you know, I wish that it was I wish it was a smoother process of being a trans person, of getting a gender affirming surgery, but the unfortunate reality that it's not talked a lot about
Yeah.
is that this does happen a lot to trans people, of getting harassed, by getting abused by healthcare providers. It's something that really needs to change.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, because that kind of BS isn't happening to cis folks. Trans folks need to feel a guarantee and be guaranteed
Yeah.
safety whenever going to get healthcare.
Yeah. Yeah. And so I will get to my final question in a minute, but like as you're talking about that, I'm remembering like Okay, so for people who have not been on Kit's Instagram, despite the fact that you are talking about some really fucking heavy shit, somehow you managed to do so with like the silliest, funnest dances and with a bright smile on your face. And I sit there and I go, like, there's so much joy there. Like, there's so much joy. And how on earth are you talking about all of this heaviness um, with so much lightness at the same time?
I mean, with shadow comes light,
Yeah. Yes. Yeah.
you know? So, like, I have had to accept my shadow. I've
Yeah.
had to tie my shadow to my heel
Yeah.
rather than reject my shadow.
Yeah.
And so with this, like, I feel like, well, I mean, to be real, I didn't think that I was going to live to be this old.
Yeah.
So because of that, I'm just like, well, then what am I going to be doing every day of my life?
Yeah.
And I'm like, well, I'm going to be talking about the real stuff.
Mm.
And I also want to have fun.
Yeah.
And so what part of it, like, if I was just talking about like fluffy things all the time, like that's pretty wild, like considering everything that's happening in our world today.
Yeah.
Like we can still be fully present
Mm.
and talk about the hard shit. Like
Yeah.
we can still talk about the hard shit and acknowledge it and
Mm.
still feel joy and
Yeah.
it be authentic joy.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. And I think for me, sometimes when I'm talking about some of the hard stuff, I want to add an element of joy because I also want to remind people that queer joy exists. And it's like we don't always need to talk about like the discrimination and the marginalization and the harm and the abuse because it leaves people feeling like there's no joy at the end of that or through that. And so I sit there and the videos just make me smile.
Oh,
It's like
good.
great. Okay.
I have a lot of fun with it with them too, and it's like
Yeah.
dance and theater of just like being like expressive, like that has been such a way for many generations that people have used to be able to talk about the hard things
Yeah.
while still being able to bring a smile and bring a laugh to people. I know that my dance moves aren't very good. I know that I look like a goofy dad, but like I embrace it. Like I'm like,
Exactly.
this is who I am, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. I mean, and like I don't know, Daggy Dad dancing is like the best to watch, to be fair. So
Yes.
yeah. Okay, so I like to finish these episodes with a message of encouragement to those who are perhaps like knee deep in the thick of, either trauma healing or deconstructing or anything in that space. What would you say to those people?
Well, in alignment with all the dark stuff that I've talked about today, don't wait to live your life in waiting for someone else to die.
Hmm. Yeah. I've had so many responses to that question, and that is the only time anyone has ever said anything like that. Say it again. Just to
I
like
don't know if I can
really,
repeat it the
just
same
to
way.
like really hone in on that.
Don't wait to live your life by waiting for someone else to die.
Mm, that's so good. And on that note, thank you so much for joining me again. It was a pleasure as always.
Yes, definitely. Well, thank you for talking about the light and the shadow here.
Yeah, always, always happy to talk about both. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of Beyond the Surface. I hope you found today's conversation as insightful and inspiring as I did. If you enjoyed the episode, be sure to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with others who might benefit from these stories. Stay connected with us on social media for updates and more content. I love connecting with all of you. Remember, no matter where you are in your journey, you're not alone. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep moving forward. Take care.